Well, hi everybody. This is Mike.
And Rob.
Hey, it's another episode of the Nerdient podcast. So, to give an indication of how this really goes for Rob and I just finished a meeting, and then he has another one in less than an hour, and so that's how we have to try to squeeze in our podcast these days. So, anyway, Rob, how are you, man?
Great.
Excellent. Hey, I'm gonna turn off my phone because it's always vibrating. Okay. Um, so I don't know. It's probably been over a week or two since we've last had a podcast. What's been going on, man?
Uh a whole lot of nothing and a whole lot of stuff. It's a weird place to be in because there's so much going on, but it's so vastly different than what anybody's really used to. It's hard to define what actually has been going on.
Right. So it's almost like this weird transitionary time over the last couple weeks about from the shock of it all to this is going to be somewhat of our new normal and how do we move forward. And I think maybe right now we're in the middle of that, and it's which makes these last 2 weeks a little bit weird all on their own.
Clearly defining the roles of what is going to be acceptable going forward is there's a lot of headbutting over what in particular is going to be acceptable.
Yeah, and there's a lot of weird, you know, I think politics are seeping back in a lot of ways too.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yes.
you and I were talking offline about here in the state of Michigan how our governor is getting a lot of flack for what she's doing, and you know, so the question is where's that kind of stuff come from? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So in Michigan, we had would you call it like a secondary stay-at-home order, or she extended it and added some things to it. And a couple of
Yeah.
things that she added to were don't go to your second house if you have a house up north, and don't go to and don't allow big box stores to sell things like paint and other home improvement things. Although, you can still go to your local hardware store and buy those
Right.
stuffs. Her intention there was that's only for
Small
large,
bit.
yeah, and so that you don't have people gathering in large spaces. And another one that I've heard people complaining about is that they can't take their boats out.
That one is the one that affects me the most.
In what way?
So I live in a small town. Well, actually, that and this going to your second home. So those two are going to destroy the community they live in. Because so much of the economy in the city that I live in is based on um, tourist traffic. So fishing is one of the biggest draws up here.
Mm-hmm.
So without the fishing, then if you can't get your boat in the water, you can't get your boat running. So that is going to have a significant effect on charter boat captains and the fishing tourism up here, like big time.
Yes.
And people were out fishing, and I know it seems weird to some people that with the cold weather and the actual snow that we're getting today, that people wouldn't be out on their boats, but that's not true. They go out on their boats and catch fish all the time. It provides low income people with food. And again, that may sound silly, but it's true,
Mm-hmm.
especially with all the restaurants and stuff closed. And two, people not coming up for their second homes means that people who have other properties up here that they rent can't get them ready for the renter season. And it also keeps all the people who do come up here out of their homes to get that stuff going, which then provides like 2/3 of our population to get these other businesses up and running.
Mm-hmm.
Also affects all the other industries because a lot of businesses shut down in the winter and go to reopen in March and April, and they don't know how to hire. They don't know how to. They don't know how much business they're going to get. It's going to significantly have an effect on everybody up here. Um, and I'm not saying that these orders are necessarily wrong, but I think they're going to have a significant effect. And I have a hard time buying into you can't go to your property. If you have a second home up here, there's no reason you can't get in your car in your driveway, drive up to your other property, and get out of your car in your driveway.
Well, I can give some perspective on that. So my sister, who lives uh, in northern Michigan in an area that does rely on tourism, and I want to be careful here because I'm going to give a broad background of who they are, just so you don't think it's somebody like me who happens to be very liberal live, with their opinions. No, her husband's a Baptist preacher, and they are conservative Christians, amazing people, but the things that come with that, leaning strong towards guns rights and individual rights, like I think we all are.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I was talking on the phone with her, she was like, in no way do they want anybody coming up, because they already had people at the beginning of this come up.
Yeah.
And she's like, our dollar store, our Dollar General is key for us up here because we don't have hardly any shopping. And people had already come up and basically had emptied the store. And she said, we don't have in our small little grocery stores the ability to restock our groceries. Like, that's all we have. So for her, even though she understands how important the tourism economy is for her area, her people in her area are just like, we don't want you here. We don't have the hospitals, the food, nothing to be able to do any of that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit of my perspective on that. And then and also, you sympathize with everybody, but I also feel like maybe it's a couple, the realization happened for a town like yours a little bit later when she said these things. But I mean, every business down here, everybody's in the same boat as far as not having income, not being able to provide for their
Right.
families. So,
For sure. Yeah.
so, I kind of get that. So that's a perspective that I've heard. So, but I don't live it. I don't live up there. That kind of stuff doesn't, I don't rely on the tourism business and the fishing business in northern Michigan to pay
Right.
me. So my perspective is skewed.
And I don't particularly either, other than the fact that it's going to limit the amount of frankly, it'll probably be better for me for work. But it's the idea that we can't handle these people coming up here. That I don't know if that's 100% accurate, because our town is built around that. It's built to sustain those summer months. What happens is everything dies down in the winter months, and then when everybody comes back up, we're at capacity. Like, we're built to be able to survive on that. And the fact that, and it's not so much that everybody's losing out right now, it's the fact that it's stopping people from being able to provide when everything comes back. Like, for instance,
like explain that to me. Excuse me.
so the restaurants, so like for instance, a restaurant, there's a restaurant that I really enjoy up the street. They ended up closing for the shutdown, obviously. But so they double the size of their restaurant from April to September or October or whatever. They hire based on that, train based on that, and staff based on that. So what has to happen is they have to hire and get people up and running and train. That's why they start in April, so that they can be ready to go when the big population hits. So what they're doing now is cutting that off now, so they don't have time to hire, and then all of a sudden they're going to have this influx of people in for when everybody comes up here. Same with setting up rental properties. Same with getting the charter boats going. These things you have prep time before you can actually get them up and running. And I understand that everybody's shut down,
right?
And I get that. My thing is that up here, maybe that's not necessary. Maybe our hospital is set up. We have a hospital in town that's set up and ready for capacity that's meant to treat larger populations like that.
I don't know. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know. Like, you could talk to everybody that is suffering because of this, and they could logic out to you why they should be able to do what they want to do.
Whatever they want. And I'm not saying I disagree with social distancing. I'm not saying I disagree with shutting down non-essentials. I'm not like any of that stuff. Like, I don't think anybody needs to go to Home Depot to get flowers. Like, that's dumb right now. But I also don't see what the problem is with my father-in-law throwing his boat in the lake and catching a couple browns so he can eat.
Yeah, well, I get you. So I think, how do you manage that, right? Like, there's a good reason for that in some circles, because it is, for 99% of the boating in the state of Michigan, it's
Hmm.
recreational. 95%,
Sure.
maybe. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
how do you account for that? There's some things that are just going to get lost aside, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
but that's you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Like, why don't we start limiting how much, like limit how many people can be on a boat? There were restrictions here. They were checking IDs at the dock to make sure that everybody who was getting on a boat lived at the same address.
well, yeah, because but we're not allowed to go out. I mean, that's no different than what would happen down here, right?
Right. Yeah. So what's wrong with that? Why that's limiting people from that's how is that any different than
Well, so the you have to engage a business that will, for most people, they have to set up their boat, gas it,
right?
all the other infrastructure, which means that's you're getting your boat ready to put it out on a lake down here downstate. It's not essential. The guy that has to fix your boat and get it prepped for winter, the people that have to work the docks that you put the gas in, none of that is essential for most of the people.
Sure.
You know, I mean, don't you think though part of it is like you could just like would your I don't know. I don't have an answer. Like what happens if he did go out on his boat now, right? And he's already got gas in it. What are they going to do?
Oh, he would get fined if he went out on his boat now.
Well, if you get out in Lake Michigan fast enough, they won't see you. And then maybe they won't catch him to find him.
Yeah, they're sitting on the docks though.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. All of it I get it. I don't know. I just
Look, I'm not agreeing with it, like
no, I
driving
get
my
it.
car into Lansing and causing gridlock. I think that's the
All right.
dumbest thing I've ever heard of. But the I just don't think that I don't know. I think it's a lot, and it really what it comes down to is exactly what you were saying earlier. It's liberty, and we're talking about what people can and can't do, and putting restrictions in place, and they seem like broad, sweeping, generalized restrictions instead of focusing on what needs to be done to be appropriate. And
So, but I'm going to interrupt you there because I think they have to be. Like, I don't, try not to be insensitive to all these different things, but there's going to be a million exceptions that they should maybe have to work through, and they don't. They're busy trying to stop 100 people a day from dying in this state. You know what I mean? I think
yeah,
you have to have those broad things, and I don't know if there's a better way to manage it. And you know, I think like my guess is like for instance, stop going to your second house is because a lot of people did it uh, in a very not mindful way of just blitzkrieging towns and
right.
not being mindful of anything of bringing your I hate to use this word, but your rich privilege from downstate and thinking you can do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. Oh,
And there's so many people that have done that I don't know how you ever have a choice other than to say, all right, fuck you, you can't do that anymore.
right.
You know what I
So
mean?
I do tend to agree with you there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of bullshit and and I was not very happy about all these people coming up here either. But the thing is that the people who were coming up here were being respectful. I had the same thought. I'm like, great, these people from Detroit are going to come up here and we're going to get hammered.
Yeah.
But the fact is that they're not. They're respecting social distancing. They're not. Nobody's running around town. Everything's shut down here. Like there's no reason to tell people that they can't have access to their property.
Well, I think so. I think there is. I
I
mean,
mean,
after New York and New Jersey, we're the worst state in the country,
right.
right? So everybody stay the hell home until the second week of May. Listen, if we get to the third, I get it. Everybody's going to suffer. We get to the third and fourth week of May, and they're still doing this stuff, and there's no reason to. Yeah, then let's all riot and attack.
I'm not even for that. I'm not even
No,
about
I
that.
know.
These protests and stuff. That's dumb. What I'm saying is that you have to understand that this is what I truly think we should do.
Okay.
Tell people not to do this stuff because we don't want them to be an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they do this stuff, fine. So put some rules in place, right? But then let it go until it becomes a problem. So like you see some asshole walking down the street, and like, or whatever your image is of somebody who would come up north and like cause problems and like flaunt their privilege or however you like, whatever your mind's eye is telling you, right? And then you address that problem specifically. But we don't need to like shut that. We're instead of taking rights away from everyone, we should look at the individual, see what they're doing, and then have rules that apply to those situations. So start looking at things from a point of view where instead of we're going to limit everyone's rights, how about we're going to fine people for doing stupid things and start looking at those particular stupid things, and then maybe have some generalized rules around what those people are doing. And I know you're gonna go on this. You're gonna say, well, if it's not well defined, how do we police it? It's going to be misused and misinterpreted all over the place. But I'd rather that it's misused in a couple small instances where we can deal with it, where the court systems can address it, than vastly sweeping liberty removal from people all across the state.
Well, that goes against your that goes against your general disdain and distrust for the general population, right? Because you give anybody an inch, they're going to take a mile. As soon as one person knows that you can pretty much get away with it until they think you're doing something really stupid, and then then it's just the whole thing collapses, right? Right?
Sure.
So
yeah, of course. That's going to happen anyway.
Right. I get all of it. I just don't, I don't know I don't know if there's any other options than to do what you're doing. And also, I think talking about it and, well, I would say this. I think here's what actually bothers me, because I understand where you're coming from. I do think that all of the decisions that our governor makes are well intentioned. And maybe that's what's bugging me a little bit more than the nuance of our conversation, because I do think your father-in-law should be able to go out and go fishing on his boat. Clearly, I don't know how you could ever make that happen in this broad structure, but when you move from, I think it's very easy to tell when somebody is not trying to make the best decisions, and I don't think that's what's happening here, and that's what's probably bothering me.
I totally agree with you. I don't have any. I truly believe that everything she's doing is what she thinks is the best for the people in Michigan.
Right.
I don't have any problem with her. I think this protesting is dumb, and I've got a whole nother thing that it's probably gonna start an entire conversation. But yeah, no, I think she's coming from the right place. I just think that some of these sweeping generalizations are based on what's best for Detroit and southeastern Michigan, and don't necessarily take into mind the needs and wants, honestly, for people who live in the rest of the state. I think people, specifically the Northwest and probably the UP, more affected by this stuff than the people who in Detroit who are bummed out they can't go to Pentwater to go fishing in May. Like, that's not the problem. The problem is the guy who has a fishing boat in Pentwater in May who needs to have that money to survive. Those are the people who are going to be seriously affected. And I think that might actually be where some of this privilege comes in on the back end. Right. So it's the flip-flop where it's focused on that privilege downstate and how to address that as opposed to what everybody else needs. But I don't think that anybody's trying to hurt anyone here. That's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
So let me tell you about another conversation I had. I am in a Facebook group that was initially intended to be like a joke group about deciding which stupid people aren't allowed to have ventilators.
Okay.
And I've gotten some intense conversations in there based on people. So it starts off with like, oh, this guy doesn't get a ventilator because he had a church service or whatever. Right. This guy's being an asshole and not helping everybody prevent this from spreading. And believe it or not, contrary to what I was just saying, I'm 100% for that. I think that everybody needs to do their part.
Yes.
To try to stop this stuff. And I'm all for that. And I understand why we have to have regulations and that. I just think that maybe we could make them a little more specific to specific areas for what they need. So a lot of the people in this group, right, start saying stuff. Like the big conversation is, do you black out the name of the person who made the dumb comment on social media? Or do we put it out there and then find out who their employer is and start doxing them all over the place? And it's like you're unbelievable. Like,
Right.
how could you possibly, like, you don't see the thing there? You're saying this person is not doing what's right. We need to call their employer and get their life shut down. And they don't see like the irony of like these people don't understand that they're putting other people at risk that they don't even know. And it's like you're doing the same thing by threatening to out these people to their employer and change their entire life around because you saw something on Facebook and decided that it was your responsibility to play superhero and start being like Batman out here trying to get people fired from their job because you disagree with their beliefs. It's unbelievable to me. So on both ends of the spectrum, it's and this is where our country is. Everybody's being pushed to one side or the other. We don't need to gridlock Lansing because you can't get on your boat or plant your flowers, you morons.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to go around and try to get everyone fired who decides to go to Dollar General
Mm-hmm.
or walk around Walmart with like the virus. I mean, it's like it is not your responsibility to police everyone.
Yes. And yes, you're right on both ends for sure. Like, you know, it calls into everything that I think both you and I hate about the extremes on either side of the political spectrum. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I saw this guy posted this video. You know, have you seen this trend? Film by hospital or whatever.
Yeah. Yes.
And
yeah. Oh my God.
It's so stupid. Like, this guy had went to one of the hospitals in Detroit this weekend. Like, whatever it was. It was just a couple of days ago, so it's very recent. And as we all know, in Michigan, the cases are plateauing, and so it wasn't surprised. Like, the parking lot was pretty empty, and he didn't see anybody getting dropped off at the hospital, and therefore it's all fake. And what I love about it is, and it brings to mind about this protest in Lansing, which I haven't heard about, but it sounds like people taking.
Oh, there's like 1,500 cars jamming up the streets in Lansing.
Okay, so here's what I would say to them, and here's what I would say to the guy in that video I saw. The guy in the video, go walk into the hospital, walk around everybody. Let me see if you actually have balls. To these people in their car, gather together, close together, on the steps of whatever, and then protest. Then let me see how brave you really are. Staying in your car to try to protest government over, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, have the balls to do it in person. If you don't think it's that big of a deal, have the balls to do it in person.
Well, the thing in Lansing, they're social distancing, but they're causing gridlock. It's like there's like as of 10:30 this morning, Lansing was like you couldn't drive through Lansing because they've got like stuff written on their cars and horns they're honking and stuff. And the same thing with these videos in the hospitals. It's like these people believe that the entire planet decided to have to lie about a virus so that one dude somewhere could so somebody could take away your right to use your boat, you moron.
Right.
Or worse, it's a big conspiracy because this is Trump going around so he can arrest all the pedophiles or whatever, like some giant, the Pizzagate ring is going to be taken out by Q or whatever. Or worse than that, 5G is doing it. Like, have you seen that?
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling how dumb these people are. Like, it blows my fucking mind.
Yes.
There's like, have you seen the map where it's like the map of 5G and the map of like coronavirus cases?
No, but I can only imagine, yeah.
So they overlap, Mike, believe it or not.
Yeah, so it's all true.
Yeah, so it's all because of the map. They look very similar. And then you know what the next map is? Locations of McDonald's in America. It looks the same. It's crazy. You know why? Because it looks just like a population density map.
Yes.
Because it is.
Right.
Because people live there, you
Right.
Morons.
And we all know 5G is rolling out right now, and you start in your most
Right.
populous. Yeah.
Yeah. Dumb dumbs. Like, it blows my mind that these people are this dumb.
Also, if those maps are even true, because all it is a post on Facebook that you repost,
Yeah.
which drives me utterly. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
And you know what? This is probably a good reason why we're shutting down stuff in the state, because people are too dumb to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, it sucks, but it's probably true. But it's everybody's so crazy on both ends, and all the time, man, all the time with every single thing. Everybody is either we need to burn down the world, or we also need to burn down the world for the totally opposite reason.
Yes.
Like, I'm not voting for Joe Biden because he raped somebody. Well, that's generally a good idea. Okay. But look at the alternative.
Right.
If I hate everything. Everybody is the worst. Bernie Sanders is the worst. Joe Biden is the worst. Donald Trump is the worst. And it's like, guys, then find something that works. Find something that works. You have to, this is your choice. So you have to make it. And you can't just say everybody is the worst. Like, that's not an option.
People are even saying that Dr. Fauci is the worst.
Yeah.
He's the best guy ever.
That dude is. And on both sides, again, Dr. Fauci is the worst. He agreed with Donald Trump. He's the worst human being. He sold his soul. Mm-hmm. Or he disagreed with Donald Trump. He sold his, like, no, he's just talking about the damn science. Like, it's crazy.
Here's a good distillation of it, I think, because I've been watching some of these press conferences that Trump is having, and they're insane. They're batshit insane, right? So, but I can look. There's two totally different perspectives on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when a CNN reporter asks a question, they'll ask him, "You said this 2 days ago, and now you're saying something completely different." That's a legitimate question, right? That's a legitimate question, and Trump just goes off, especially if they're a woman, and just says you're fake. And he won't answer the question. He answers it by, and people will say, "Well, those CNN reporters are horrible," and that's a legitimate question. But here's also what CNN does: is they'll air the press conference, and as soon as Trump gets done with this crazy, insane shit, or however you want to call it, and then the real people are going to talk, they cut away from the news conference and talk about all the shit he said, when we all know he just says stuff off the top of his head. He just rambles. So it's a legitimate question to hold his feet to the fire for what he said. But when you're going back to your analysis phase, like, we know he says shit all the time that he just comes off the top of his head. And I'm tired of you telling me that he lies all the time, or, you know what I mean?
So I think there's a lot of indecent activity on both ends.
Right.
I think the way that a lot of the press treats Trump is unacceptable. And so
I'm gonna have to qualify that.
Yeah. Right. So Trump he's like not my dude, right?
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, he's still the president of the United States. And I think that regardless of how you feel about an individual, if you're in the press, you have to report accurately about what's happening. And a lot of the press on both sides, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, whatever you want to get into, focus entirely on attacking Trump. And we have gotten away from
defending Trump.
Actual news or defending Trump. Absolutely. So what we see is a lot of back and forth, and providing ammunition for these people to go back and forth and have hour-long news shows that are literally just name calling and attacking, and no actual talking about the news, about what actual reporting on things that are occurring. And that's a problem. These reporters who are asking questions, the questions are perfectly legitimate questions, but what's the purpose? They're attacking Trump to get Trump to trip up. and say, "Oh, I have a. You're right. Oh my God, I was totally wrong 2 days ago, and now I've changed my opinion." Or I'm just making this shit up as I go. But the overall purpose of that is not to provide anybody with any factual information. It's only to trap him into making him look like a buffoon. Go
But
ahead.
well, first of all, I'm just going to go ahead and say he makes himself look like a buffoon on occasion, all on his own. Um,
No argument here.
yeah, and definitely those are some of those questions like that, like Jim Acosta, but are are like that. Hey, they're just trying to get a rise from. But I also, I mean, it's so we don't do nuance and complexity is hard, especially in this country. But like for instance, 2 days ago when he says I have the complete authority, it's a fair question to follow up and say, what does that mean? How constitutionally, where do you think these powers are coming from? You know what I
Sure.
mean? Even
But you know
though,
he doesn't know the answer.
because there is no answer, because he's spewing shit from the top of his
Right.
head, and
So you're just
all the man cares about is like that he looks great.
sure. What
Which,
kind of fact? Right. Which is not
fine.
right. But it's not right to make, but you're buying into his trap there.
Oh, sure, sure,
Because
but
that's what he wants. Because then he doesn't have to. So then all of a sudden, like you're addressing him and you're not addressing the issues. You're getting trapped. It's not any different than when you get into an argument with your kid, right?
right,
So you tell your kid to go do the dishes, and he's like, "Why? This is nonsense." You're like, "Because I said so." And he says, "No, I'm not going to do it." And then you guys get in an argument about something that's totally different than the dishes. And meanwhile, the dishes aren't getting done.
yes,
This is the same thing. You're having an argument with a man about whether or not he's right or wrong, and totally missing the point where you should be talking about the issue that he's skirting in the first place.
right. So when you're talking with a child like that, as part of the issue is like um, they don't have fully developed adult brains and can't handle some of those complex conversations. And right, right. So yeah, no, I struggle with the exact same thing, where there are questions that I appreciate that they ask, but maybe what bugs me is then when they get back to the studio and they go to the analysis thing and they got to just talk about it or whatever. We know why Trump said that he has the total authority because he doesn't
Right.
know anything about the Constitution. He's got the largest ego since I don't know who, Napoleon, maybe, I don't know. Who knows, right? And that's what I mean. So his nature, or any president's nature, is not an excuse for any type of behavior. But you should know the person's nature and how you deal with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Press needs to be smarter.
Well, and then on the opposite end of it, and I there's some parts of CNN that I like when they get to the news and trying to be neutral, fine. But since all of this has been happening, I really become more annoyed with it because focusing on the president and trying to tear him down is job number one, and then secondary is the reporting of the news, which they do,
Yeah.
but you have to find it. And Fox News does the same thing because they do it from the other end. What they do is
Yeah, they try to build
they,
up Trump.
they start with trying to find something that's going to, uh, yeah, they start with the assumption that everything that he's doing is amazing, and then try to find proof that doesn't exist that what he's doing is amazing, and that can get in the way. That gets in the way
News.
of the truth. And when he does,
Yeah,
when I
absolutely.
think of very not now because of COVID, but in the past when he does do something that's helpful, he's his own worst enemy because you know what I
Nobody,
mean.
right? Yeah, and that's the thing is that, and I'm gonna catch a lot of shit for this. He's not as bad as everyone says he is. He's done some things to help our country.
Right, but
Usually they have a secondary motive for that,
yeah.
but regardless, he's done some things that have been helpful.
So it's the nature of the person that you have to say ahead of time. I'm gonna get some flack for this
Right.
because in some audiences you would have to say I'm going to get some slack for this, but there's a lot of shit that he's done that's bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, true. 100%.
Right.
So I think we can all agree that he's a jerk.
That he's a joke.
A jerk.
Yeah. Oh, he's a jerk. Yeah. When when my wife watches him, it's hard for her to like. She can't get beyond the fact
Right.
that he is like em, embodies the worst that she feels of men in general, regardless of politics.
Absolutely.
Right? Like he, you know,
Yeah.
and it's obvious. Like the way he treats female reporters in news conferences is vastly different than he, treats them out. The whole
Yeah.
list. That's who he is. Yeah.
Right. The problem is that half the country was able to get past that, and the other half isn't.
No. Half the country thinks that no matter what he does, it's amazing, and the other half of the country thinks no matter what he does, it's not amazing. It's not about one side getting past or the other side getting past, right? Because neither side has. Like people that are true Trumpers think that everything he does is amazing, and then we're gonna find when he does something that's not amazing, we got to find the proof to say that it actually was amazing.
So, outside of Fox News, I don't think that's accurate. There's some people that I know that are very much pro-Trump, that are very much like, he's an idiot. I wish he would stop tweeting. He says dumb things. I wish he would think things out better.
I hear that too. But I think that's a bullshit answer. Oh, if we could just, because it's essentially saying if we just ignore what the president says, then it's fine. And you can't have that, and that doesn't make any sense to me. Right? Yeah. I think that's a bullshit way for people to justify liking this man regardless of who he is. When you just say, well, if we would just ignore his tweetings and if he would just shut up and stop lying and going off the top of his head and condescending and putting people down, then he'd be great. That's all he does 90% of the time. And then he tries to surround himself with people that makes good decisions that he can jump on, except if the people on Fox News think it's a bad decision, then he'll go back on that. Because he's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think you're wrong.
Okay.
But I also don't think he's nearly as bad as everyone. I don't think there's some huge conspiracy, right? Where he's like plotting and planning to do all this weird stuff. I don't think there's some Russian conspiracy. I don't think there's, at least not that he put together. I don't think there's a lot of the stuff that.
Okay, so I can see, but I can reply to you and say that most people are the anti-Trump people don't think that way either. They like to have fun and talk about, the PP tape in Russia because because we all find, because
it's hilarious.
If something's funny, it's just objectively funny.
Right.
So, so I don't know. I get it. I get that. Everybody on every side looks stupid, and that's the reaction to Trump in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What can you do? But we're not talking about politics. We're talking a lot about politics.
Yeah. Sorry.
So no, I'm fine with it. It's fine with me. But the problem comes in is how to be objective. Like I objectively think that he's doing. I don't know if I want to say mostly bad job, but whatever is below a mostly bad job with this, right? With the COVID, with all of this pandemic stuff. But there's going to be people on my side that say he's doing 100% horrible, and there's going to be people on the other side that say almost everything that he's doing is great.
So what I don't like that he's done is a lot of the making the states pander to him. Right?
Yeah.
I don't like that he tried to downplay the severity early on. But I think he doesn't get enough credit for shutting down travel to China early.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, so I agree. And there's a lot of people earlier that had said, well, that's not going to do anything. And then he shut it down from Europe, whatever.
Pretty quick.
Those are two good things. Unfortunately, the problem, not with him, unfortunately, the problem with that is it's insane. Like people will travel from China, then they'll go to 4 different countries and then come here anyhow.
Sure. Yeah. So, right. Okay. But he still tried to do something, which is all you can ask somebody to do in an unprecedented situation.
Yeah. Listen, against all of against the entirety of his nature, you can tell that he's generally been paying attention to Dr. Fauci and the other
Yeah.
doctor. I forget her name, um, and I don't want to, but you know who I mean. Yeah, I'm sexist. So yeah, I mean, sure, that is something that he should get credit for. Despite everything in his nature,
So
he's been paying attention to of them. And when Mike Pence isn't up there kissing his ass, Pence is doing a pretty okay job.
so by telling people, by trying to calm the American public, he's trying to calm some sort of like, overreaction.
But there has to be some. It has to be based in truth.
Sure, but keep
He
in mind
doesn't
that,
base much in
that's
truth.
what we're still early. It was like in Washington and New York, and it hadn't been as vast. And I think most people kind of knew that was not going to be the best case scenario. Um, but so, but I get it. Sure, maybe it can be seen as him lying, trying to pretend like all this other stuff. The economy falling out, the markets dropping, certainly is not his fault.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody is saying it's his fault.
Some people, I mean, I've heard that it's his
Well,
fault.
but most people are not. Most, even people that are unreasonable about Trump, most reasonable people in that, we know it's not.
Give it time. His pandering to the states is terrible. That's reprehensible. What he said about don't call back that woman in Michigan or whatever. Insanely offensive that he would do that.
Well, he does that at his own reelection peril.
Yeah, no shit. I mean, that was
like people are pretty damn loyal to their states.
Yeah.
And so
I agree.
when even though they might not like Whitmer in this state, some people, whatever.
But it's our state.
It's our state. The fact that he implied that the state wasn't going to get supplies because of the way she treated him, whether that's true or not,
right,
is I think might doom him in Michigan, no matter how much people end up hating.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I can make fun of my own family, but if you do, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah.
So that's reprehensible. But then to follow that up, everybody, like people from like Democratic governors from all over the place, are saying what a great job he's doing with providing them with everything they need right away, calling them back right away, getting them supplies right away, sending them everything they need now. So he's changed that, and I'm guessing that's because the doc was like, "You need to get this stuff done," and they started doing it. But that's the latest thing, is that apparently he's been really good about responding to these needs of these states.
So, yeah. Sure.
Probably for re-election, sure, but at the same time.
No, I don't even think it's about re-election. So the part of that is because of who he is, you can't just, it's impossible to evaluate anything outside of who he is. So in other words, all these governors know that you have to kiss his ass in order to get anything done.
Sure.
Right? So is he really doing a lot of stuff, or are they continue to flatter him so that they can hopefully get more stuff? I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you. Here's what nobody wants to say, governors or Trump and his team. And this is where everybody's at fault. Nobody has the balls to say we got caught with our pants down. States weren't ready. Government wasn't ready. The way we run our healthcare system, that it's just-in-time service, just like our businesses are just-in-time. And that's why that's why we're struggling to get maybe some drugs from China, or all these other things, masks, respirators, because we do everything just in time. And states weren't prepared for a pandemic, and the national government wasn't prepared for a pandemic. That's the job of the national government, to have a program. And they could ask states to then implement it. You need to buy this, have this. But everybody got caught with their pants down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but then how do you? So if everybody got caught with like, I wasn't prepared for a pandemic either. You know what? Like, were you?
No. So the problem comes from either him or it isn't even Trump, but because I can imagine any president doing this. But to keep lying about the availability of testing, to keep lying about he wants to make this impression that respirators were available for everybody at whenever they needed. Anybody can get tested. And all that stuff is just not true. You know what I mean? So when somebody in a press conference gives you flack about that, you don't just go and say GM is now making respirators. You say, hey, we only had a certain amount. It's going to take time to ramp it up. You have to understand that. And then so that's just the way it is. And that has to be your consistent answer. We get that from them, but then when anybody questions him, what he might perceive as a slight or that he didn't do something properly, you know
Yeah,
what he does? He attacks. He,
right.
but I mean, I guess everybody does. I don't know. I would expect the president not to do that, but
Oh, this is the president we have.
I know.
Like that's the dude who's elected.
I know. I just, it's, he makes it hard for anybody to give him any recognition.
I totally agree with you.
Um, it was a bazillion times easier for me to give George W. Bush recognition for some of his leadership during 9/11 than you could ever do for Trump, because
Mm-hmm.
and I don't. That's his fault. That's not my fault. Don't you?
Yeah, I guess it is his fault, but is it his fault? I mean, that's who he is as a person. Isn't it our fault for putting him in office?
Well, I mean,
And if that and is it necessary for him to get recognition from the country
it
in
is
order
for
to
him.
be right?
That's
For
all
sure.
it is. He doesn't give a shit about anything but him because he can.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you can't hold him to the fire for being that person.
I don't know.
I get held. I get my feet get. We all have strengths and weaknesses, right? If I let my
He's
weaknesses, that's who I am. Hey, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
If I let who I am dictate how I do my job,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to lose my job.
Right. But here's the thing. That's not how it worked with him.
I know.
Right? His weaknesses, he's overcome them and put himself in a position where he can be elected to the presidency of the United States of America. So clearly he's doing something right.
Well, did he do something right? I mean,
Yeah, clearly. He's got half of the country convinced that he's the man.
well, slightly less than half. But...
Oh, yeah. Okay. Right. You're missing my point. So
I'm not
this
missing your point. I'm just being obnoxious.
yeah, you bringing up 9/11 brings up a whole nother conversation that I had the other day.
Okay.
Which do you think, when this is all said and done, will have more of an effect on the way the United States is in our life?
Mm-hmm.
The coronavirus pandemic or 9/11?
Oh, this for sure.
Do you think so?
I think so. In a different. Well, after everything from 9/11 washed out, and I'm talking maybe a couple of years later or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, we had to deal with some more it's a little more difficult to travel in an airplane, and we have this whole new, like, the government is the one that's focusing on terrorism. I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, there's a whole brand new, like, Homeland Security, a whole new issue of government where they're there to protect us from terrorism, but it isn't. That's distant. That they do that, and it doesn't affect my day-to-day life. I think this is going to affect our day-to-day life for a long time, because now a lot of it depends on the longevity of this virus and how often it comes back, and it does, and how long it is before we have a cure, not a cure, but a
Vaccine.
vaccine. Thank you. So I think it has a longer effect that way. Does that make sense? 9/11 didn't have such an effect immediate of how we lived our day life, other than we're just freaked out because we got attacked on our soil. Somewhat.
I would argue that the 9/11 will have a greater effect. Here's why. I think that this pandemic, it's going to significantly change a lot of things in the short term. I think people are going to be a little more scared to, like, be around other people, big groups. But I think once we get through and they reopen everything and everything's back to, like, we can go to a baseball game.
Yeah.
the effect on the day to day is going to be significantly less. I think we'll be more prepared for a pandemic, and people will still have that fear of the possible pandemic. But I don't think that it will affect stuff so much as so. I think 9/11. This is how I see 9/11. Right? There's a terrorist attack. Everybody's terrified.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's all these wars and striking back and all this American pride and all this like uh, xenophobia and that stuff that came from it. And then once everybody saw how awful that was, we saw a complete flip where it started us talking about all of these social injustices and how we need to really change them.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we're back to having a backlash because everything's there's too much social justice and we need to get back down to a baseline. And I think that's still having an effect in our country today. I think all that stems from 9/11 and all of the LGBT rights, a lot of this Me Too stuff, a lot of this blowback on religion, all stems from that. I think that as a culture, it's opened our eyes to significantly see that we can't have these singularized viewpoints of this is bad. Everything is gray, and we can't categorize a group of people based on a single characteristic of those people. Wow. I don't know how this pandemic does that. I don't see it. All it is we're going to have more fear about people getting sick. But I think as we realize it and we get a vaccine, that's going to fall off. There'll be long-term repercussions to the economy. There'll be long-term repercussions to social services. But outside of that, I don't think it really affects how we're going to view everything.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like society continually evolves. And
yes,
and those evolutions in society would have happened whether 9/11 happened or not. I think how we reacted to them might be a little different. But if you look over the march of time, like for instance, I know I have a lot of conservative Christian, born again Christians in my family, and I know for a fact that younger generation of them have a lot of them have completely different views of LGBT than some of the older generations, and that to me is a function of how our society continues to move forward. So, well, I think 9/11 could have certainly 9/11 started putting us into our corners and how we react to it, but I think there's always going to be a slow march of societal change because I see it. My daughter's 20 now; she's gonna be 21, and her baseline, even though I'm a liberal, her baseline is totally different than mine, and she sees my views as antiquated in some areas, and they are because society continues to march forward.
How old is she?
She's 20.
So what year was she born?
She was born 7/8/1999. She is the first of the Gen Z generation.
How much of her social political beliefs were developed before 9/11?
Well, none. But I mean, but that's just a function of her age.
Right.
Yeah.
So her entire identity is based on post 9/11 philosophies. So she's in her. You're saying she has a different view.
I would say her because of her age. I would categorize it as post 2008. When the economy crashed in 2008.
Okay.
That's how I'd say it's more informed than post 9/11. Because that's a huge inflection point for, I think, millennials and Gen Z. Because there's a large streak of, I wouldn't say it's anti-capitalism. The message of Bernie resonates to those who are listening in that age group because of the utter ridiculousness of capitalism in the way that we implement it in this country. Because it's not really so much capitalism as it is we go a decade until the financial sector figures out a new way to rip off everybody of their money, and then they get richer, and then everything collapses, and then they make regulations to stop that, and then another 6 years. Another 6 years. It's all a cycle of people with a lot of money figuring out how to take it from people that are not the 1%. And that's what drives. That's our version um, of capitalism. And
Yeah.
I think somebody even in my generation wants to still have has sees like the ideal of capitalism, which I think works, but the way that it's implemented in this country is not even close.
So I'm not saying I disagree with you. Can you think of an example of something that came to light of that nature before the war profiteering from 9/11 with Blackwater?
Oh, that's a good question. Um,
Possibly Amway and the Ponzi schemes?
yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's been sort of like in my mind, it's been a slow march, and this idea of uh, massive deregulation of these large industries, especially financial industries.
Oh, this
Um,
stuff that's going on now, yeah, it's scary.
yeah, right. And so you have to, if the purpose of a corporation is to enrich shareholders at no cost, then you have to have a significantly strong thing on the other side to buffer against that nature.
I totally agree with you.
And
I'm not
over
arguing
time,
it.
yeah.
I'm not
So
arguing that point is wrong.
I don't know. To me, I don't
All
know
the
if there's I think that's like when you talk about Blackwater and war profiteering, that's the government end of, you know what I mean? That's just another aspect of it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. No, I think that all of that stuff comes about because government saw that as an opportunity to seize control
Yeah.
and that's when we got all the money injected through lobbyists. You
Mm-hmm.
saw a huge increase in lobbyists around 9/11. Um, the that's 9/11 is a big reason why a lot of this money has been injected. A lot of that private money gets injected into our politics.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was there before, but not nearly as
no.
substantial as it is now. I think the privatizing of jails by Reagan and them had a big chunk to do with it.
Sure.
But a lot of that was Bush grabbing for the
Right.
all that for the wars.
Right. No, and it was people. Yeah, and then a lot of people like Cheney and other. It was a good time to jump in. Well, it was a good time to jump in and try your philosophy of government.
Yeah,
because you could get
and how to rob them blind.
Yeah, because you could get anything pushed through Congress at that point. And I think you're right. That is it is a pretty big inflection point because I remember back then arguing with somebody. To me, it was very clear that the aspect of that war about how to occupy and transform Iraq was one of the most misguided things this country has ever done. They didn't approach it from their culture. They approached it from trying to put our culture on it. And it was very objective, but I just still remember conversations with people who were Bush supporters and agreed with the war that they couldn't accept that fact or that part of that war, like that we fucked that up royally, how we managed our occupation of Iraq. You know what I mean? And that was the beginning of, that really was the beginning of everything my side does is correct. And then you had Michael Moore on the other side saying everything that Bush is doing is incorrect. And it's very easy to jump into that kind of thing, especially when you're younger. I had, even though I wasn't that much younger, I was still an adult, but like I had my George W. Bush with the W. You know what I mean? I had all that propaganda. I had my picture taken with Mike Moore. I met him once and all that kind of stuff. So, but I do think you're right. I think that's an inflection point. But that's an inflection point. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this affects the broader sense of society when this comes about, because we don't know what we don't know. There are some signs that it takes a long time for this to go away. People not getting reinfected, but their infection that they previously had comes back. And the difference with this thing is it's so contagious, and that's the difference with a lot. And that's why we don't know, because it's so contagious, and people are getting sick from other people before they know they're sick. And there's so many people that have had it that
are still out.
Well, they have no idea that they had it, or they had a,
My big thing is that when we do reopen everything, we're going to see everything spike again. That's my fear.
Right, that's my fear too. And so I'm hoping that, like, you could say in Michigan, in this area right now, all right, everything's back to normal. 80% of people aren't going to do it anyhow. You know what I mean? I don't think so. Like, I'm not going to.
Oh, dude,
I don't
I
know
can't
how
wait
people,
to have a pizza.
huh?
I cannot wait to have a pizza.
We've had one pizza delivered.
Yeah, we've had zero. We've completely shut down. I
That's
have
it.
the only time I've left the house is to like I went and got propane the other day. That's the only time I've left the house in like 2 weeks.
Have you even just driven around,
So
gone for a walk or a bike ride? You're allowed to do those things.
yeah, I know. I'm home for work, and then by the time I get done with work, it's too cold to go out and walk around. I went to my in-laws and took care of some of their leaves. But I mean, I'm outside of my yard.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it.
But like, yeah, no, I'm not leaving the house. And it's not. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about like somebody else that I care about getting sick.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah. Like when we got that pizza, well, it was all fine, but like he drops it off, he leaves it on the porch, and then I go and get all of my wipes and I wipe down all of the cardboard box
right.
outside, and then I slide it on a plate underneath it and bring the plate in, and then take the box out to recycling, never letting it in the house, and then I go wash my hands for 30 seconds. Fuck that!
Yeah.
I'm just gonna have a grilled cheese instead.
Yeah.
You know what
No,
I mean? And so I don't um as long I don't think people are just going to be able to, if Trump had the authority said go economy, people aren't just going to it's people are going to phase themselves back into it. I hope.
I hope so.
I hope so. I don't
I,
have the best have you been on this site um maybe I'll send it, but it's the main charts that everybody uses to gauge when things are going to
CDC?
huh?
The CDC's website?
No, this is COVID-19
Oh yeah, yeah,
data dot, and they up there and they break it down into each state, the
yeah.
curves of everything. And
Yep.
so I just think people should rely on that a lot more because they've been damn accurate and they adjust the projections. So
Yep.
you know,
Well, and the that's the other thing that people are like, well, look, it's not happening anymore. Well, no kidding. That's because you're inside. If you go out again, it's going to spike, and that's what I think that a lot of people aren't getting.
right.
But that being said, people should be able to go to their summer homes. Like, look, it's your summer home.
I
You
would
should
just
be able
like, but I
to
still
do
want
it.
to point out that there's a ton of people up north that don't agree with you.
I know. I've talked to several of them.
Right.
I
And
don't agree with like, you know, impeaching our governor because of this.
yeah, no, I know.
But I also think that there's got to be a more rational way to address it.
Mm-hmm.
But who am I? I don't know anything.
I don't know. I mean, this my guess. These are just guess that, but in Michigan we're extended till the end of April, and then it's obviously going to go farther than that. But I'm hoping the next round of restrictions backs up on some of that stuff, and I think
Yeah,
maybe
I
it
hope
will.
so too.
All right, I'll point out one more thing, and I know you got a meeting to go to.
Yeah,
I just don't know if you remember this, but all right, am I doing a humble brag? I think I might be.
do
We,
it, bring it.
when you and I were talking before we ever had our first podcast,
Yes.
we were talking about Trump reelection and stuff like that.
Uh huh.
And you're like, oh, doesn't matter because people are Democrats are being dumb and all this stuff. And I said,
They are.
but I said at that point, none of it's going to matter. This is in January. I said, whatever happens with this COVID thing that's happening in China and is about to hit our shores will completely decide whether or not Trump gets reelected.
Yes, you did say that.
Do you remember that?
I remember. Yes, I remember you specifically saying that.
Yes. And
Uh,
I think that's 100% true.
you're right. I think Trump's going to be elected either way.
I don't think so. I think we need to be careful to not be skewed. No, I don't know if I want to go there. Um, I try to look at it from a broad, part of that conversation was, I really think part of Trump's election, I know most of it was his appeal to he appealed to a lot of people for a very valid reason.
Yeah.
That being said, Hillary Clinton broke that election up more than anybody possibly could.
You don't think that the DNC is messing up this current election worse than the last one?
No, because it's different now. I think the strategy of just giving it to Joe Biden works in their favor.
They did it way too late.
No, they didn't. There's no campaigning that anybody can do right now. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if let's say Joe Biden went out of the gate as the number one candidate and he didn't flub up his speech every once in a while and he didn't reveal that he's, I mean, Trump does it too, but it's a little more obvious with, he'll say stuff like, Trump will be like, shush, shush, shush. You ever catch some of those things? That, yeah.
Yes.
But anyway.
You don't think Biden does it, but he's just as bad.
No, I'm saying Trump is just as bad as Biden, but it's more noticeable with Biden.
But Trump's insulated from
that. I don't know. I don't think many people have been swayed much since this election. They've only become more embedded, but there's always middle undecided. That
two sides of the Democratic coin has the Bernies and the Joe Bidens, and they're split. And a good chunk of the Bernie people say they're not coming over.
There's not that many Bernie people. If there were that many Bernie people, he wouldn't have
Bernie
lost.
Would be the nominee.
Bernie wouldn't have lost Michigan by 10 points.
Right.
After winning it 4 years ago, if there was a lot of Bernie people. Like, young people just don't vote. And so they're already out of the equation as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they're going to not vote in the same numbers they always not vote. So I don't think that matters.
I think the impeachment helped Trump significantly.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters.
The problem is that it hurts the Democrats.
I don't think it hurts anybody. It's Clinton still won more votes in that election. Every election, except for save a couple, this country always votes for more Democratic senators and more Democratic representatives than they do Republican. It's just with gerrymandering and the way that the states are laid out. You know what I mean? And even though she lost by not that much. I just think, I'm not saying that Democrats are going to win. I just think it's as wide open as it ever has been.
I would like to see some campaigning that talks about what the Democrats are going to do. That isn't I want to see some positive reporting on what they're going to do that's not anti-Trump.
Well, I mean,
Bernie at least was doing that.
I mean, I think you'll see some of that from Biden. I mean, you have to run against, everybody's always has to run both on what they've done and against the candidate. That's just the way it is. Listen, if Biden's out there saying some shit about Trump, the always Trumps and the never Trumps are not going to change. There's a tiny margin in the middle. And I think they're even more wide open than they used to be. Because that's what decides the election. And with what I said earlier, how he handles this COVID thing, which I don't think he's doing all that good of a job. But we'll see. I don't think it's a shoo-in, that's all. I think it's wide open.
Never Bidens now, too.
Is there?
Enough that I know it's a hashtag.
That doesn't mean shit.
I know.
That doesn't mean shit.
Well, we'll see.
You know what I mean?
Biden is not looking like a good candidate.
It's he doesn't have to be. He might be just the right candidate at the right time.
Yeah. We'll see. It's going to be tight.
I mean, who knows? Who knows, right? Yeah. If the economy, who knows? I mean, so many jobs have been lost. Like, how many, a bunch of those might just come back right away because businesses can, who knows? It's where the economy is in October that matters. No matter, it doesn't matter that the economy falling isn't Trump's fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the same way that it probably wasn't Clinton's success that had the economy firing when he got reelected, which allowed him to get, you know what I mean? It's just, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Let's sign off because I got to get off.
Yeah, no, I feel you. All right. Until next time, Rob.
Bye, Mike.
See you, man.